Kings, Queens, and Internet Fiends. Today we're going to touch on doom scrolling a little bit. And don't worry, this is not an intervention. I'm not a cop. This is more just going to be about the brief science of it, why it's a thing, why it's always going to be in your life, regardless of how you feel about it. It's just kind of the direction that we've decided to take with technology. And a couple ways that you can combat kind of these maybe detrimental habits that you have within yourself. Okay, so first thing, what is doom scrolling? Doom scrolling is this coined term that we like to put off when it comes to, watching short-term or watching short-form content on a long-term scale, like the same way you'd watch a movie, but instead you're gonna just kind of spin the wheel on the phone a little bit. But the terminology really comes from the idea that you stay on your phone long enough to the only thing that keeps you retained on the kind of adventure in your scroll is that the information gets more negative and negative and negative over time, to the point where when you get 3 to 4 hours in, that's where everything becomes bad news or horror stories or worst case scenarios for a future reality that hasn't happened yet. Because the nature of how your algorithm works or how your phone or being on social media works is that retention is one of these things that tries to help you stay on these apps longer. And at first they can be very calming or simply something that aligns with what it is that you're thinking about right now. Like, let's say I talked about toast for an hour before I got off of here and got back on my phone. Then my phone might hear that and be like, okay, cool, let's go ahead and show you some toasters or some bread. But when you have no context for what you've been looking at or no context for what it is that you want, then we kind of always revert back to what I like to call brain rot Reggies, rot Reggies for short, which is, these guys are addicted to two things. It's chaos and dopamine, right? Those are things that it doesn't matter if you have anything on your list of things to do, if there's anything on your brain, if there's not, those things will always be there for you, waiting on the opportunity to get it to you. Think about when somebody yells fire. People teach you at a very young age to yell fire instead of help, because more people would rather go see a fire than they would, help somebody out who's in danger. These are kind of the natures of human behavior, but it's also just the nature of how it is that we view content as a whole in society, which isn't necessarily always a bad thing. You can do a lot of good things and expose a lot of new ideas, new information, and global happenings. But the problem with doom scrolling and the problem with how it is that scrolling at a large scale can affect you is that it really builds off of things that don't necessarily feed your inner dialogue. It doesn't necessarily feed your inner goals. It only feed what it is that builds more anxiety or depression-inducing feelings and emotions. So what that means is that the longer that you spend on these apps, the longer that you kind of fall down this metaphorical. And it starts with maybe your interest. Right, and go a little bit deeper, and now instead of your interest, it's your insecurities. And the further you fall down this rabbit hole, the further you go from positive to negative until you get to the bottom, and now it's just a dumpster. Right, and then you play around in this dumpster fire until you literally can't anymore. And then it's like, okay, fine, I think I need to go to bed, or I think I need to get off of my phone. And then you kind of take this and apply it to your everyday life, right? And so as an athlete, what does that look like? I still have lift, I still have workout, I still have, class, school, coaches to respond to, scouts to email, and then of course an agent to adhere to if I'm at that level. So this isn't very good at programming your own life. It's really good at keeping you stagnant and wanting to kind of see more of this negativity over time. People can get addicted to the worst case scenarios. It's like watching a car crash. It's not necessarily something you want to see, but once you start, you can't look away. That is what keeps a lot of people stuck. And over time, that can be more detrimental than you think it is, because it's not a source of information. Now it's a source of a lens of how it is that you see everything in your life, right? And in the same way that if you're a person who wants a car and you go out and you go to the dealership and you say, all right, Mr. Person, sir, I would like to buy a red car. And you buy, what's gonna happen when you take that car onto the street? You're gonna start seeing more red cars everywhere, right? In the same way that scrolling works, you're gonna see more dumpster fires everywhere. And as a person who understands the difficulty of juggling a lot of different problems at once, it's like being a skier going down a ski lift or going down a mountain. They teach you to see white snow because if you start looking to avoid trees, you're gonna start seeing a lot of trees. And that's how you end up in an ambulance or on the side of the mountain with a broken neck, right? These are just the nature of how we look at problem solving as a whole, right? And if you are constantly looking for the next problem, the next dumpster fire, the next car crash, then you do a very bad job of being adjustable, right? And that's the next kind of phase of being a creative, being a courageous, and a person who is authentic in their own autonomy. Because if you're not able to adjust on the fly and have your schedule the second it goes out the window might set you back 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, because your rhythm is so fragile and you have to kind of encase yourself and encage yourself in such difficult and hard regimens, which is why you see all the content creation or the videos about, oh, if you want to be a disciplined person, you got to wake up at 4 a.m. and take the cold shower and eat the ice chips and sit in the ice bath and then, run 12 miles. The reason that people have to do that is because they have to regiment them so hard to factory reset all the negativity that seems unavoidable in their own life, right? And so it's more about the nature of how it is that you're looking at problems and problem solving as a whole, because that directly affects the type of entertainment content and attention that you feed yourself over time. So what do we do about it, right? It's not necessarily a thing that's super avoidable. I mean, I go to Best Buy and the 3 people who are trying to sell me a microphone, 2 of them are stuck on their phones and one of them might be helpful, and then the second that I look away, he's scrolling on his phone. So it's not necessarily something to where it's not just one person or another person, or it's bad or it's avoidable. It's this thing that's a conscious new reality, but it's also a superpower. So the better question is, how do you use it? Especially as a form of entertainment. The argument is our long form content is a better way to maybe feed the itch for something that you want to go down the rabbit hole of learning about. So if I'm really into cars for the week, maybe watching an hour video about cars is going to be enough to sustain that itch that I have for myself. But what if I'm just bored? Kind of the same way that people find themselves in detrimental habits such as vaping or eating too much junk food. It's simply because you don't know what to do with your time. And if there's an idle time to do something, you're going to go ahead and feed it with something that stimulates your brain back to the rot raging idea. What is it? Calamity, chaos, and dopamine. Those kind of 3 hits are what kind of feed the person who has nothing to do or no idea for themselves. We really want to avoid that as we try to purposefully be intentional about what information we're feeding ourselves. Because there's an opportunity to learn everything that you want to be able to better engage your audience that you're building, engage your coaches, your scouts, your family, and honestly, your personal vision. But the problem is when you're not necessarily in control of the way that you're affected by the media and content that you consume, now you're a part of the problem because you start spewing hate or you start reflecting what it is that you're letting in. We are all kind of mirrors, and especially with the ample amount of exposure that we have to information, we mirror whatever information we're given, and we also become sponges for the things that we look at. And so if you treat it like it's nothing, like, oh yeah, I just spend 3 hours on my phone looking at nonsense and then I put my phone down and it doesn't really affect me, then you will not be able to recognize how it is, maybe putting you in a disadvantage or simply just, affecting you, like in the same way that there are global viralities. Like if you think about the 21, 6'7", the random dance, these viralities are things that play along with how we globally communicate and subculture, right? So it's not necessarily all bad. It's invasive and it's a new landscape for living. And so if you can blend those two together in the same way that anime has blended itself with sports because of how prominent it is in the sports community, it's made it to where now you can connect to communities over time. So it's not bad, it's more about understanding the nature of it, and the nature of it is it's a big casino. Imagine yourself playing a slot machine. It's all fun in games if you're looking to hit big with your dopamine spike. You just want a big laugh, you want something cute to look at, maybe a dog. That's all cool, there's nothing wrong with that. But it becomes a problem when you start spinning the wheel to help you decide what you're gonna do with your life or do tomorrow or do for the next hour and a half. Especially as rising rates of ADD and attention deficit or social anxiety and not being able to put yourself in public situations that really build you and put you in uncomfortable positions to grow as a person, then you slowly become just a gambling addict to find out what it is that's going to be able to stimulate you long enough to feel something, right? And if you play that game, you'll end up as a brain rot Reggie. Like we said, the winners of those games are people who are addicted to chaos, calamity, and dopamine. And when you start looking at it this way, you have what we like to call spectators and we have players. You can't really simultaneously be both. You can be aware of both, but it's really difficult to be both a player and a spectator at the same time. If you are, you're not really doing either one at 100%.
I call her karma. She eat your heart out like Jeffrey Dahmer. Oh my gosh. Alright, I gotta see if I can export.